Hey there, it's Chris here and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to go through a video I saw the other day, which I found really interesting, and it's Takashi from Japan on his channel, and he goes around asking people how to learn languages, and it's titled Asking Japanese Teachers How to Learn Japanese Faster. But actually he asks teachers and he asks people who have learned on their own, and it was really interesting to see the similarities between the advice each one gives, but also the polar opposite advice. So I just want to give my 2 cents and go through the interviews, and hopefully we can learn something.
Okay, thank you for your time. Could you introduce your background?
Hi, my name is Koji Sensei. I am from Tokyo, Japan, and right now I am an online Japanese tutor.
I'm Risako Onishi from Osaka, Japan. I'm currently living in Mexico City as a Japanese tutor and content creator.
Hi, I'm Sayaka and I teach Japanese online. I've been teaching Japanese for like 5-6 years now. I live in Nagoya. Lived in the United States for 2 years in total.
In Japanese.
In Japanese? Okay. 皆さんこんにちは、アナヤです。日本語を7年間以上独学で勉強しているインド出身のアメリカ人です。
日本語で動画も作ったりしてるっていう。
やってて、日本のメディアとかにも出たりとか。
As a Japanese tutor, I'm gonna ask you some questions.
So we've got 3 teachers and 1, was she from India? Self-learner. So let's see the contrast between the advice they give.
First of all, what's the best way to learn Japanese from scratch? How would you answer?
In the beginning or the earlier stages, I would say to focus on pronunciations, because over time, if you start building up the habits of saying words in Japanese, it will be difficult to fix it. So I would focus.
Okay, that doesn't really make sense. He's saying pronunciation should be first because you'll build a bad habit. But if you start on pronunciation first and you have no template for how the language is supposed to sound, isn't that going to make you build a bad habit? Let's see what he says.
Well, I would focus on pronunciations by working on the shadowing and then listening. So
No, right in.
That's pretty interesting. He's saying learn pronunciation by focusing on listening and shadowing. So he's like 50% right, although while you do work on pronunciation by focusing on listening, I would say you focus on listening to get good at listening, and then later your pronunciation will actually become better from that, in my experience. Shadowing at the beginning, again, you're shadowing a language that you probably haven't heard a lot of, so you haven't built up that template in the beginning. So I would say, while pronunciation will improve from listening, you should focus on listening to get good at listening, and I would scrap the shadowing completely, because it's something that you could maybe do later on, maybe after about a year. But this is very common of teachers to say, you know, I was a teacher for 14 years, and the way they're taught to teach in their universities, in the teacher training, is focus on speaking. I'm going to make a video about this next week, about my experiences and sort of the red pill of language learning from the perspective of a teacher and a language learner as well. So what he's saying doesn't really surprise me. As a teacher, he's saying focus on pronunciation, and he's hinting at having a speaking focus at the beginning, which I disagree with.
So
No, right in. Reading.
Of course, hiragana and katakana are pretty important as well, because hiragana and katakana are the reading syllables for us. To read a kanji, we need hiragana and katakana. So I would say these two.
I would start from learning the characters, but not just the characters, but also some basic phrases and stuff. I think it's important to learn all of it all together at the same time. I wouldn't just focus on hiragana, katakana, but I would try to learn phrases and try to write those phrases in hiragana and katakana.
I think it'll be a kind of...
So we have some common ground here. They both think that you should focus on hiragana and katakana first, and that's also in line with immersion learners of Japanese. They're like, learn hiragana and katakana in the first 10 days. Should be the first thing you do, and they seem to agree there as well. Sayaka, I believe is her name, she said do everything at the same time, focus on kanji. That should probably come after hiragana and katakana, and then focus on phrases. Well, phrases is just then getting into your sentences. I would do sentences after kanji, or the most common kanji. And phrases, yeah, they're just sentences. So when she says phrases, she's probably thinking about like how to say good morning, my name is, where's the train station? And yeah, I agree, those phrases or sentences should be some of the first ones that you put into your sentence deck.
How I learned Japanese. I started off back in 2013 and I started just like looking up how do you learn Japanese. So right now, you can learn Japanese fairly a lot easier than maybe like 20 years ago because there's so many resources. And so then I looked up how I learned Japanese and I found some blogs on the exact process to do it. And I was like, well, let me just try this out. And
I wonder if she's talking about alljapaneseallthetime.com, because when I was studying Chinese before coming to Taiwan, I stumbled upon alljapaneseallthetime.com and then I just applied that to Chinese. So let's see what she says.
I downloaded a bunch of apps on the App Store and I just tried all of them. And I was like, okay, there's a couple I like. I started learning hiragana, katakana, and then kanji. And then I started to understand a little bit of the grammar. And then I was just watching a lot of anime, dramas, and stuff, listening to Japanese music already. And so then...
Seems like she's describing AJAT. Learn hiragana, katakana, kanji, then immersion, and then getting used to grammar and sentences.
And after a while, it was like really exciting to hear words that I learned. It's better almost to watch like TV dramas and stuff because when you have example sentences, you're attached to the context of that show and you know what they're saying, and so it's easier to remember words and how to say it.
So you speak Japanese, English, Spanish?
I agree. That's why I started using Magaku for my sentence mining, because Magaku will spit out the image of the scene that you got the sentence from along with the audio and then the translations, etc., and it will export it into Anki, or you can use their flashcard app as well. And it's true, you remember easier because you'll see the picture and then you'll hear the sentence and you'll remember that part. You'll be like, oh, I remember when he said that in that show when he was arguing with this girl about this and then he said that sentence. So you've got a lot of context there. That's something I really am still really loving about Magaku, and that style of going through Anki reps is, people say don't spend too much time on reps, but I think with Magaku you can, because you're also listening and reading as well. It can combine a lot more into your immersion because your Anki reps becomes immersion because of that listening element.
When you watch anime, does it help to learn Japanese?
It definitely helps because the more you hear, the more you get used to hearing Japanese and get used to the intonation of Japanese. The students I've met who have the best pronunciation or intonation, they all have been binge watching anime. So I think it totally helps, and also to develop vocabulary.
This makes sense. I mean, I don't know if I heard this analogy or I thought of it, but it's kind of like if you take two people and you teach them a new word in a language they don't know, and one person you say the word to them one time and then they practice it 20 times. How do they sound on the 20th time that they say it compared to you take the other person, you say the same word to them 20 times and then they say it once. Who's going to sound better? So generally it's going to be the person that heard it the most. So, a lot of teachers won't know this. So she's kind of on the ball and she realizes the importance of listening. The reason is, I'm going to make a bigger video about this, but it's because language schools are a business. And when someone sends their kid to a language school, they want their kid to come home, and when the parents say, hey, what did you learn today? They want them to be able to say something so they know that they're spending their money's going on something. They're actually seeing the returns. Unfortunately, that's not the best way to teach language. But you can't have a kid come home and the parent says, what did you learn today? And the kid goes, I didn't learn how to say anything, but my comprehension got better, I think. That's not gonna fly. So language teachers generally buy into that idea of like practice speaking. Speaking's the most important thing. But she's obviously come to the realization that her students, her best students, the ones with the best accents, are the ones that have listened a lot. Okay, and now that should really at this point be common knowledge.
Any negative aspect of learning Japanese by watching anime?
You learn some bad words and some words are not really used in real life. So maybe that's the disadvantage?
To study Japanese or to learn something just in general, you have to have a passion, right? I always tell my students to have passion in Japan, like learning Japanese. And if it's just understanding anime, I think that's amazing. And also
He's absolutely right. I would say the most important thing in language learning, he says passion. Maybe I'll agree with him. I usually say motivation, but motivation is going to come if you have a passion for it. So sure, let's say passion is the most important thing. I agree. I think one of the reasons I didn't follow through with Chinese past like a intermediate level is because when I started watching TV and mining words from TV, everything I found boring. I didn't want to watch anything. I didn't want to watch Taiwanese TV. I wasn't really interested in the movies because there aren't that many anyway. But with Japanese, you know, they have an interesting pop culture with anime and really good movies. So you can maintain that motivation, that passion, because you want to understand something that you actually want to watch and understand.
anime is a great way to build up your vocabulary or phrases that we use in daily lives. You know, action animes, they use the phrases that we don't really use in the daily conversations, like maybe omae or like yatte yaruze or something like that. So that's something that you should be careful with, but it's nothing wrong with like being familiar with those.
Interesting, because I get so many DMs on Instagram, and then some people call me like kisama, which is very, very, very rude. I never heard of it in real life, but very rude. But you know,
so you should learn those words, right? Because if someone walks past that starts calling you that, or if someone's like being silly and making a certain kind of joke, like an in-joke with their friends, maybe they'll start using those words from anime, you know, to just be silly. So, you know, while you shouldn't use those words, it is good to know them, so you know if someone's, you know, saying it to you.
they use it a lot in anime, so I think they assume that it's okay to use it, but like it's not okay. So don't call me kisama. But anyway,
I think it's difficult to learn everyday Japanese words from anime. I think it makes it difficult because you don't know which is which. But what I think it does help is with listening practice, because you will hear words that you've studied before and you'll get used to hearing Japanese. So I was watching a lot of anime the first 3-4 years that I started Japanese learning, and there are animes that have very natural speaking Japanese as well. So I think you can totally use it, but I think if you aid it with something like TV dramas, you'll get an idea of what normal Japanese speaking is. The first 5-6 years that I started learning Japanese, my entire world.
That's good advice. If anyone has any TV dramas that I should watch, I'm all ears, because right now I've got a full list of anime that I'm gonna get through, but I should mix it up with real humans as well. I think that's good advice.
That I lived in was in Japanese. Like, I would make notes in Japanese, I would watch TV in Japanese, and I would just try and make my entire environment that language. And that included music. I listened to Japanese music, TV shows, like variety TV shows as well, like comedy, anime, and I would call my friends in Japanese, or I would write blog posts in Japanese. And yeah, basically every single part of my life was that.
in this video,
I'm asking Japanese.
So she's talking about immersion again, which apparently is a good idea. Who knew?
any common mistakes Japanese learners tend to make at the beginning?
In the beginning, I would say the biggest one is the pronunciations. We have like certain or specific pronunciations that only exist, well, probably only exist in Japanese, like long vowels, for example, is if we say movie in Japanese is e ga in a written, but when an a sound and an e sound together, you would say e ga, so hold it like a long sound. And which
It's interesting that he says the biggest problem is pronunciation, but he also says people should focus on pronunciation first. Bit of a contradiction. Maybe you shouldn't focus on pronunciation first if it's going to come out wrongly, right? And if you've taught like 100 or so students or more, and this is a common mistake that you see, why would you continue to make them focus on pronunciation? But I guess it's because if you're working at a school, like I said, people want to know where their money's going, and they think they need to be saying things in order to feel that progress. You know, maybe don't go to school and do self-study. I don't know.
Anything you did but you didn't need to?
Oh, I bought like a dictionary of all Japanese verbs, and I tried to memorize like every single day like a verb, and it didn't work at all. Like it was such a waste of.
This is such a common thing. People buy like vocabulary books and stuff like that because they want to like feel like they're being a good student. And nearly everybody I've heard with a kind of story like this is exactly the same thing. Yeah, I bought these couple of books, and then they just, you know, threw them away.
Nowadays, we use a lot of online resources, so if you can recognize the kanjis and understand the meaning of them, I think it's fine. However, in the daily lives, like if you're living here, you need to know how to write them. So balance is probably important. I wouldn't say like you need to know like 100% of the 3,000 kanjis by tomorrow. You can learn like 10 a day, or like even one a day is fine, but know how to write them and kind of get used to writing those. At the same time, reading and understanding the meaning, I think.
So you cannot ignore, but you don't need to focus that much.
Right. I would say so, yeah.
You can ignore. I'm ignoring. It depends what you want to do, right? I guess. If you want to work in a Japanese company, maybe you need to learn how to write, fill out an application form, that kind of thing. So it depends on what you want to do.
At the end, any advice to those who just started learning Japanese as a Japanese tutor?
Okay.
What do they need to do?
Like first of all, just congrats your journey, your decision on like to learn Japanese. Like learning vibe in this educational ambient, I think it's very positive. You learn a lot of things, right? You understand better yourself sometimes. Japan, it's a weird country really. We live in a bubble without knowing that we are. But that means that we have a very weird concept of lives, tradition and culture. So enjoy it. And I think with each expression that you learn in every class, you find a bit new piece of Japan, piece of culture that can be really interesting.
Interesting, because learning the language, it's also including learning the culture, right?
I'm starting to get to that point as well. There are certain ways Japanese people say things that you wouldn't say in English. The structure I'm thinking of is the concept of saying like I must do something. If you translate it directly, the way they structure it is something like, if you don't do it, it's not good. And it's a grammar point that I'm slowly grasping now, but it was difficult at the beginning. And it just shows you the kind of passivity, if that's a word, the passiveness or the politeness of a language. By not, you know, in English you'd go, you mustn't do that, but in Japanese they're saying, if you don't do this, then it's not good, kind of thing. You know, very verbose language. They add words to add politeness, which I guess is the same in every language, but it's definitely a big thing in Japanese.
Exactly.
Don't forget to enjoy learning. Don't stress too much. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just try to use them as much as you can. And if you can communicate, that's all what matters, I think.
The biggest thing is to have a courage. You will be coming to Japan, which is completely different culture, language, living setting is so completely different in Tokyo especially. So it's good to have a courage to live here.
The thing I like about this guy, even though the teaching aspect, some of the things he said I disagree with, one thing I do like about his advice is he's talking about these like intangible, important elements that go into language learning that people don't usually talk about. The first one being passion. That's gonna keep you going till the end, you know. I've said it before, that with language learning, or with anything that you're trying to improve, even going to the gym or whatever, anything that takes months to kind of accomplish or years to accomplish, you're going to feel that the days are long but the years are short. So to get through those long days where you don't feel like any progress is happening, you do need things like passion. And when you get to the point where you can speak and you do hit this other problem, you know, up until that point your problems will be like understanding how grammar works or these particles work. But then you're going to have these other problems where you're going to be, you know, sat around with a bunch of people and you're going to say something and you're going to say it wrong and maybe they'll laugh at you a little bit, you know, maybe not in a hurtful way, but maybe you say something funny because it's a bit wrong. And you need courage. You definitely need courage. I remember going through that phase of like people go, oh, speak Chinese, say something, and you're like, it's so cringy. But yeah, it's good advice. You will eventually get to the point where you need courage, and you do need passion for sure.
and then courage to learn or use Japanese. And that's probably the fastest way to learn a language as well.
Another intangible trait, I would say, I think I said it in my last video, is the ability to be okay in the unknown. To be okay be okay not knowing when things will come into fruition. Be okay with not knowing when something will happen or not knowing how quick something will happen. Don't look at it like there's an end goal. Just look at it as this is just part of your life now. I remember when I used to do like different workout programs. It'd be like a 30-day program, and I get to the end of the 30 days and I'd be like, okay, I've seen some improvement, and then I would stop. So I was thinking about working out as this thing where I'm like, I'm starting now and there's an end goal. And the thing that made me more consistent with the gym, which is probably the same with learning Japanese, is that I no longer think of it as doing something to an end goal. I just think, oh, this is a part of my life now. You know, I work every day, I eat breakfast every day, I go to the gym every day, and I study Japanese every day, and this is my life. There's no end goal. This is just how I live now. So think about it like that if you're struggling.
So it's not necessarily like study skills or anything, but I would say it's more like a mindset that I would always recommend my students as well, to be passionate, to have a courage.
一つだけなんかちょっとこう言いたいことは、なるべく自分の知らないことを全部知ろうとする、その好奇心がすごい大事だと思ってて、そういうマインドセットが特に私にとってすごい効果的で、やっぱりそのちゃんと時間をかけてやることが意外とすごい大事だなって最近思う。なんかもう小さいところでもひたすら勉強することですごいレベルにたどり着くと。
I wonder what she means by that. Because a lot of people will also say, like, don't spend too much time stressing over one like grammar point. If you don't really get it in that moment, just scrap it. And they would say like the fun is more important than the, you know, trying to nail something down. I'm not sure if that's what she meant by study things thoroughly, but it sounded like it. There's definitely some argument to be had there, whether you should try to nail something down, you know, and stress about that thing, or you should just move on. In my experience, I would say move on. You know, you don't have to go at something that hard if it's starting to stress you out, and you'll notice after more immersion you will come back and it'll just kind of click after, you know, a couple more months. So interesting. That's the end of the video. I think that was interesting. Yeah, a lot of good points raised, and it was really interesting to see the lady there from India and her experience with it, which is a lot more similar to the way I'm studying, and then teachers, which is a lot more similar to the way that I've taught, or I used to be a teacher. And whether you're a Japanese teacher or an English teacher, you are teaching in that same way, where you're working for a business and the business wants kids coming out the school and saying to their parents, my name is Jonathan, or whatever. And the parents going, wow, they can speak English. Yay, let's pay more money for more lessons. So it's interesting. I'm going to do a video about that this week, maybe not tomorrow, but this week, about what I learned being in that education industry, being on that side with my work, but then being on this side with what I actually believe. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next time. Take care.